Have you ever felt that the deeper your thoughts run, the more distant the world around you feels? That the more clarity you find, the less others want to listen? If so, you're not imagining things. Throughout history, society has feared those who see too clearly, not because they are wrong, but because they threaten the fragile constructs most people depend on. From Confucius to Nietzsche, from Copernicus to Lovelace, profound thinkers have often been isolated, rejected, or quietly erased, not for their flaws, but because they revealed truths society wasn't ready to face. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that intelligence is less a gift and more a heavy burden, one that sharpens vision but tears the soul from the comfort of the crowd. But why? Why does society resist those who dare to think differently? The answer isn't found solely in history books. It lies within the mechanics of the human mind itself. Consider this. When you stand next to someone physically stronger, you might admire them. When you meet someone richer, you may feel envious but not personally attacked. But when you encounter someone who thinks more profoundly, it touches something far more sensitive, your very identity. Psychologists refer to this as the mirror effect. Deep thinkers do not merely introduce new ideas. They serve as a mirror reflecting the limitations of those around them. And humans by nature struggle to forgive those who expose their insecurities, even if that exposure is unintentional. The silent presence of a profound mind can make others feel painfully inadequate without a single word being spoken. Why does this phenomenon exist? Because intelligence, unlike strength or beauty, is woven into the fabric of self-perception. Our beliefs, thoughts, and understanding form the very core of who we are. When someone comes along who questions those foundations, it feels like an attack on the self, even if it is merely an invitation to think deeper. This is why throughout history, philosophers, visionaries, and critical thinkers have often found themselves pushed to the margins of society. Their ideas don't just challenge the system, they challenge the ego. And human beings, above all else, are wired to protect their ego from harm. Reflect for a moment. How many times have you brought up a profound question or a challenging idea in casual conversation, only to be met with blank stares, awkward silence, or even hostility? It's not a coincidence. It's a defense mechanism. When faced with ideas that unsettle their worldview, people resist, dismiss, or even attack. In fact, social psychology has uncovered a brutal truth. Confidence, not depth, often dictates influence. Charismatic individuals who project certainty, even when their ideas are simplistic or shallow, tend to attract more followers than those who speak with nuance and caution. History shows this pattern again and again. The most confident voices, not the most insightful, often lead the crowd. This is the paradox of intelligence. The deeper one dives into truth, the more disconnected one becomes from the comfortable illusions of the majority. The mirror effect doesn't just reveal individual insecurity. It exposes the structural resistance society has to meaningful change. But does science support the idea that intelligence provokes fear? Absolutely. Modern neuroscience has shown that intellectual inferiority activates the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. Deep thinking doesn't just intimidate, it triggers primal fear responses similar to facing physical danger. Why? Because for most of human history, survival depended not on standing out, but on fitting in. Tribes valued harmony, not dissent. Rejection meant vulnerability. Thus, our brains evolved to prioritize social acceptance over independent thought. When a deep thinker enters a group, they unintentionally destabilize the social fabric. Their ideas question the rules, challenge the leaders, and unsettle the group's cohesion. The group's instinctual response? exclusion. In fact, research at Stanford University in 2021 confirmed that deep thinkers are less threatening in one-on-one settings, but provoke defensive reactions in groups. Social standing becomes the battlefield, and intellectuals, by simply existing, become a threat to the group's hierarchy. Cognitive biases further explain why deep thinkers face resistance. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows that those who know the least often overestimate their competence, while those who know more doubt themselves. Status quo bias makes people cling to familiar ideas, even when those ideas are harmful. And the backfire effect causes people to double down on false beliefs when presented with contradictory evidence. These psychological defenses explain why new truths face not just skepticism but hostility. Intelligence doesn't just challenge ideas, it threatens identities. In the age of social media, the situation has only worsened. Algorithms prioritize engagement over insight. Outrage, humor, and simplicity spread faster than careful, reasoned thought. In this environment, deep thinkers struggle to be heard, not because their ideas lack value, but because they require patience, nuance, and reflection, qualities that the attention economy actively discourages. Platforms reward those who condense complex ideas into catchy slogans and sensational headlines. Meanwhile, those who speak with nuance are drowned out by the noise. Thus, society increasingly rewards entertainment over enlightenment. But what does this mean for deep thinkers? It means understanding that the rejection they face is not personal, it's systemic. It means recognizing that their loneliness is not a flaw, but a reflection of a deeper vision. Schopenhauer offered profound advice for those who think deeply. He believed that solitude is not a punishment, but a sanctuary. Instead of seeking validation from the crowd, he urged thinkers to immerse themselves in art, philosophy, and the company of other profound minds. Rather than lamenting the inability to fit into a shallow world, deep thinkers can find meaning in their solitude. By understanding human nature, they can navigate society wisely, choosing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to challenge and when to observe. Schopenhauer saw intelligence as both a curse and a liberation. It frees one from illusions, but also strips away comforting falsehoods. It grants clarity, but at the cost of belonging. True wisdom, he argued, is accepting this trade-off with grace. If you have ever felt disconnected, misunderstood, or isolated because of your thoughts, know this: you are not broken. You are simply awake in a world that prefers to sleep. Yet the question remains, must deep thinkers resign themselves to isolation forever? Or can they find ways to bridge the gap between depth and society? Understanding human psychology is the first step. Most people crave comfort, not truth. They seek certainty, not complexity. This is not because they are evil or foolish, but because their brains are wired for survival, not philosophical inquiry. Recognizing this allows deep thinkers to approach society with compassion rather than contempt. It allows them to share insights wisely, planting seeds rather than hurling stones. Moreover, society does change, slowly but surely. Revolutionary ideas that were once rejected often become accepted norms over time. The thinkers who plant the seeds of change may not live to see the forests they create, but their work endures. In an era dominated by superficiality, depth is a revolutionary act. In a world that prizes conformity, independent thought is a form of courage. The deep thinker, though often lonely, holds a torch that lights the way for future generations. In the end, the struggle of the deep thinker is not just a personal burden, it is a gift to humanity. By challenging illusions, questioning assumptions, and daring to think differently, they keep the human spirit alive. So if you find yourself walking a lonely path, take heart. You are part of a lineage of minds that have carried civilization forward, not by conforming, but by thinking beyond the visible horizon. You are not alone. You are simply ahead of your time. The loneliness paradox. Loneliness among deep thinkers is not accidental. It is a natural consequence of heightened awareness. The more one understands the intricacies of human behavior, the harder it becomes to engage in the superficial rituals that dominate social life. While most find comfort in small talk and shared illusions, deep thinkers see through them and often feel trapped between the desire for connection and the inability to find it. Schopenhauer versus Nietzsche. Views on solitude. While Schopenhauer saw solitude as the inevitable fate of the wise, Friedrich Nietzsche embraced it as a necessary crucible for greatness. Nietzsche argued that profound ideas are born in isolation, nurtured away from the herd. Solitude, in his eyes, was not just a condition to endure, but a path to becoming. Deep thinkers and depression. Biological angles. Research shows that higher intelligence is correlated with greater sensitivity to existential concerns. Brain studies indicate that deep thinkers often have heightened activity in areas related to self-reflection and abstract reasoning, a double-edged sword that makes them prone to overthinking and existential depression. The mind that sees further also bears the burden of seeing more sorrow. The role of education systems in suppressing thinking. Modern education often rewards conformity over creativity. Schools are structured to produce workers, not philosophers. Standardized tests, rigid curricula, and obedience to authority suppress independent thought. Deep thinkers who question the system are labeled troublemakers rather than celebrated as innovators. How institutions reinforce conformity. Beyond education, corporations, governments, and even media outlets prefer predictability. They thrive on maintaining the status quo. Employees who challenge norms are often sidelined. Citizens who question authority are labeled dissidents. The result? A society that prizes compliance over critical inquiry. Case studies: Socrates, Galileo, Hypatia. Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth by encouraging them to question tradition. Galileo was forced to recant his scientific truths to avoid execution. Hypatia, a brilliant mathematician and philosopher, was brutally murdered by a mob for her refusal to bow to religious dogma. History is filled with cautionary tales of deep thinkers crushed by the systems they dared to challenge. Strategies for modern intellectuals to thrive. Despite the challenges, deep thinkers can thrive by building resilient inner worlds, seeking out kindred spirits, creating art, writing, and practicing selective vulnerability, sharing deep insights only with those ready to hear them, are ways to preserve sanity and purpose in a shallow world. The bittersweet legacy of deep thinkers. Though often marginalized in their lifetimes, deep thinkers shape the future. Their ideas, once seeds sown in solitude, eventually bloom into revolutions of thought. The loneliness they endure is not in vain. It is the fertile soil from which progress grows. Hope and legacy. Why deep thinking matters more than ever. In a world increasingly saturated with noise, the need for deep, courageous thinking has never been greater. As humanity faces unprecedented challenges, climate change, technological upheaval, existential risks, it will be the deep thinkers who light the way forward. Final reflection. If you feel isolated by your thoughts, take heart. You are not failing. You are succeeding at being profoundly awake. Yours is the burden and the gift of consciousness. Cherish it, nurture it, and remember, even if the world does not yet understand you, the future will thank you for daring to see what others refuse to. You are not alone. You are the vanguard of what is yet to come.